Hey everyone, welcome to the video. Going my cheat sheet for today's late MLB main slate for today on DraftKings. Anyway, before we continue, if you could leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my new videos, I would really appreciate that. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16, and if you want access to my entire MLB sheet and my Slack chat, the link is in the description below for my Patreon. So let's get into the slate. Now, it's not the best one. The earlier one was bigger and better, but we still got some good plays in here in this one. So at pitcher, we have James Paxton, Joey Lucchesi, and Eduardo Rodriguez. So let's get into the pitching sheet to see why I like these guys. So let me sort this by salary here. So up top, we got Erod, and he's been having a good season. He's got a 4.23 xFIP, 24% strikeout rate. Walk rate's at 8.8%, but that's not too bad considering the slate. He does not allow a lot of hard contact whatsoever at 30%. Does not allow a lot of fly balls. He gets a lot of ground balls, so I do like that. Now, is he really expensive? Yes, he is, but it is a good matchup versus the Royals, and he is a heavy favorite as Glenn Sparkman's on the mound opposite of him. And I do think the Red Sox pretty much mash him and should get him the easy win. And the Royals are not very good versus lefties. If we take a look at the Royals splits versus lefties, they have only a 78 WRC plus, 148 team ISO, and 292 WOBA. Now their strikeout rate is only at 24%, but that's not it's not terrible, nor is it good either. So I think it's a pretty soft matchup for Erod here. He should have a pretty good game. I know he's a hefty favorite. I think he's a negative 340 favorite, so that is massive. That's 90 points higher than anyone else on the slate. James Paxton's at second, a negative 250. And speaking of James Paxton, let's talk about him. So I like him. It seems like every time I recommend him, though, he has one of his bad games. So hopefully that does not happen here. But if you look at his numbers this season, his ERA's pushing over 4.5, but his xFIP's at 3.99, K rate at 29%, walk rate's up at 9%, which we don't like. But he's been elite versus lefties, as you can see. But righties is where he's been having some trouble with a 259 ISO. Strikeout rate's still high, but the walk rate's higher. But the thing is, the Orioles are not going to walk a lot. They're not a disciplined lineup, so I do think Paxton can have a really good game here. We like using lefties versus the Orioles. If you look at their splits versus lefties, it's not very good. 26.7% strikeout rate, low team ISO, low team WOBA, low team WRC plus. So I think this is a pretty good matchup for him. He's a negative 250 favorite, so do like the matchup for James Paxton, and he is one of my core pitchers because we do get 1,000 savings off of Erod because I really don't want to pay $10K for Erod on this slate. Then Joey Lucchesi, 8,600. Now he's having a decent season, not as good as the other guys, but 4.29 xFIP's nothing to bat your eye at. 22% strikeout rate, gets a lot of ground balls, doesn't give up a lot of fly balls, doesn't give up a lot of hard contact either. Obviously, been really good versus lefties, a little bit worse versus righties. But if you look at the split, the opponent splits versus lefties, so every single guy I like today is a lefty, but they strike out a lot versus lefties. The Mariners do 26.2%. Now they do have some pop and power, but I think he can survive that. He doesn't give up a lot of hard contact or power in the first place, so I think this is a pretty good matchup for him. And I really like the idea of going Paxton and Lucchesi as my two starting pitchers for today. And that's going to do it for the pitching. Let's get into the bats for today now. So catcher, we got Yasmani Grandal at 3,900. He's really cheap. Going against Trevor Williams, who has a really low strikeout rate versus lefties, and is just a worse pitcher versus lefties. I believe his strikeout rate's at 14% to lefties and 22% to righties. And the Brewers got quite a few good lefties, so I do like that Brewers stack today. And then Austin Hedges, if you just want a cheap righty versus Kikuchi, who does struggle with walks and strikeouts. I meant to say power. He struggles with power to righties. And then if you're not using those two, just whoever fits at the end of your lineup, whenever lineups come out, there's a cheap catcher, just plug him in. Then at first base, we have Mitch Moreland at 4,100. I love the Red Sox versus Glenn Sparkman, specifically the lefties, although there's not too many great lefties in the lineup. The righties are still in play too, but man, Sparkman's been awful versus left-handed bats this season. Mitch Moreland's always been pretty good versus righties. He's got a good shot getting a home run here. He hits lower in the order than I usually like, but this isn't a big slate, and the Red Sox are one of the top snacks on the slate. He's only 4,100, so I do like Mitch Moreland quite a bit. Then Eric Thames, he's a decently cheap lefty versus Trevor Williams. He's always hit righties very well. And then Christian Walker at 4,100 versus Jason Vargas. Now, Jason Vargas has been pretty good this season, but he does give up power to righties, so don't mind Christian Walker. Second base, we have Brock Holt at 3,300. Second base is usually a position I like to spend down on, given the slate, but He's only 3,300. He should be hitting, I don't know, anywhere from. He should have a decent spot in the order. If he's like hitting 8th or 9th, probably not interested, but I don't think he's going to be. So 3,300, a lefty versus Sparkman, it's really interesting to me, especially as a cheap piece of that Red Sox offense. Eduardo Rodriguez at 4,600. Eduardo Escobar at 4,600 versus Jason Vargas. Escobar is very good versus left-handed pitching, so I don't mind using him. Then Mike Moustakas at 4,300. This is a lefty versus Trevor Williams. Like I said, lower strikeout rate to lefties. Mike Moustakas has been hitting righties very well this season. Then third base, Manny Machado, who is a core play for me at 4,300 versus Kikuchi. Manny Machado is one of the best players in the league versus left-handed pitching. Now, he was 44% owned on a 15-game slate versus a lefty last night, so just imagine his ownership today versus a lefty on such a smaller slate. Was it 5 or 6 games? So expect Machado to be chalk, but I think you absolutely have to play him in cash games, especially at that price tag. Then Rafael Devers, 5,600. He's super expensive, but this is one of the top home run calls of the entire slate versus Sparkman. Then Moustakas, we already talked about. And shortstop, we already talked about Machado. Gleyber Torres at 4,800. Now, John Means, he is something else this season. I don't understand it. So if you look at his numbers here, we're back into the pitching sheet. He's got a 3.12 ERA, which looks outstanding. But he's got an xFIP at 5.42. That's like 2.5 points higher than his ERA, which is absolutely insane. I believe it's one of the highest in the entire league. Now, he's got a 19% strikeout rate. Doesn't walk a lot of guys. He gives up a ton of fly balls, but the hard contact's really low as well. So he's getting, soft fly balls, easy fly outs, and the ground balls really aren't there, 34%, but he's been very good versus lefties, where he's got a 28% strikeout rate, 176 ISO, which isn't the best, but versus righties is where we want to use batters against him, where he's giving up a 16% strikeout rate, 173 ISO. And really, I just don't understand how he's been so good, getting so lucky, really, because his ERA and xFIP are one of the most substantial differences in the entire league. At some point, it's going to break, although I keep saying that, it just doesn't break every time. But going against the Yankees, it's a tough matchup for any pitcher, so I could see it, the stat getting to him today. And then Nick Ahmed at 3,800, he's pretty decent versus lefties, better splits versus them, so I don't mind using him as a cheaper Diamondback. And then in the high-priced outfield, we have Christian Yelich at 5,700. If I like the Brewers lefties, obviously I have to like Christian Yelich, who's basically been the best player in the NL this year. No disrespect to Cody Bellinger, he's right there with him. But I definitely like Christian Yelich. And then JD Martinez at 5,300. So Sparkman is really bad versus lefties, slightly better versus righties, but his strikeout rate is really low versus righties, even lower than to lefties. And I mean, he's not a good pitcher anyway, so the righties can get to him, especially guys like JD and Mookie Betts, who are just elite talents. And then in the mid-range outfield, we have Aaron Judge at 4,800. Just the power righty versus John Means. Again, John Means has been getting very, very lucky this season. Hopefully the luck runs out at some point. I think Aaron Judge is going to carry a lot of ownership, below 5K. And I would probably try to get him in your cash games. Then Hunter Renfroe at 4,300. He's been awesome versus left-handed pitching this season. Tons of power, and Kikuchi is not a very good pitcher, especially to right-handed bats. Then Adam Jones at 3,900 if you need a cheap righty versus Jason Vargas. Then in the value outfield, we have Trent Grisham at 3,200. I have him as a core play today. I think he's an awesome spot. He's been doing well recently. He's been leading off, and just versus Trevor Williams, just a cheap lefty versus them, and it's a good piece of that Brewers stack. Then Will Myers at 3,700. Again, just a cheap righty versus Kikuchi. Tim Locastro at 4K. Just a decently cheap righty versus Jason Vargas. And then Jackie Bradley Jr., cheaper lefty versus Glenn Sparkman on that Boston stack. So really all the value outfield is just cheap pieces of players on stacks I like today. And then if you go to some of the core plays, I got James Paxton at 9K, Machado at 4,300, and then Trent Grisham at 3,200. And the top stacks for me are going to be the Red Sox, Yankees, the Padres, the D-backs, and the Brewers lefties. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for the video. Remember to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you don't miss all my new videos. I'd really appreciate that. Follow me on Twitter at ChrisPinell16, and if you want access to the entire sheet and my Slack chat, link is in the description below. Alright, wish you guys the best of luck, and I hope you're having a good early slate.